Jean Grey once killed 5 billion people because she was hungry. And you've probably never heard that story. Not a war, not mind control. She was crossing between galaxies. She felt an appetite, and a star with living worlds looked like food. The people who watched stopped calling her a hero. They started building weapons. So how does that happen? How does the weakest recruit in X-Men history become that? And why is the strangest chapter happening right now, in the comics on shelves today, where the sister she buried is suddenly back, warm, breathing, asking her to stop asking questions? Stay with me. I'll show you what the Phoenix actually is, what it does to her, and why that dead sister might be the most dangerous thing here. But none of it lands until you've seen how small she started. 1963, a taxi, and the girl who moved a chair is about to be introduced to you by her looks.
Issue 1 of X-Men introduces 4 boys by their powers. Jean doesn't get that. The professor announces a new pupil and describes her, before you've even heard her name, as a most attractive young lady. The boys crowd a doorway to watch her taxi arrive. But the audition is the real gag. I wish I was joking. She telekinetically slides a chair, dumping the professor out of it. One of them tells her, to her face, that her real power is making a man's heart beat faster. Her answer? She hoists him to the ceiling and leaves him hanging there. And that's her entire kit in 1963. Moving objects with thought. The comic says so plainly. If you're waiting for the telepathy, it isn't there. Only the professor reads minds. Her one combat moment, flinging a single missile into the sea. Picture pitching her as the future strongest X-Man alive. You're not buying it. But 13 years later, a burning spaceship did.
So here's how she dies, the first time. A space shuttle, a solar radiation storm, and no shielding left for the pilot seat. Jean straps in anyway. She flies her friends through the fire and rides the ship down into Jamaica Bay, while the page welcomes you to the last moments of a young woman's life. The team surfaces one by one. She doesn't. And then the bay starts to glow. The water explodes, and Jean rises out of it in a costume you've never seen, announcing that the woman they knew is gone, that she's fire and life incarnate, now and forever. Phoenix. But you need to see the very next page. I mean, the next one. She's screaming that her mind is burning as she collapses back into the water she just rose from. Picture that. The most triumphant panel in X-Men history has a horror panel stapled to its back. So what exactly rose out of that bay? For a long stretch, not even the comic was sure. And the thing inside her hadn't finished growing. Because the power wouldn't stop. The professor puts it in one sentence. Too much power, too soon. She can't control limitless abilities. Earth's smartest man runs the numbers and gets a reading that could rival Galactus. But here's what creeps me out. The finale's own recap picks one word for those months. Warped. What does that build? The comics named it Dark Phoenix. So what does that name actually cost? She leaves the planet, then the galaxy. And the motive is the one I told you at the open. Because she was hungry. She picks a star, and the comic reads you its statistics like a case file. 1 million miles across. 14 million degrees at the core, 6 billion years of life left. Then it tells you that future now measures in minutes. 11 planets circled that star. The 4th was inhabited. So the page takes you down to the ground with them. On the day side, they see the light first, 10 minutes after their star dies, and it's the last thing they'll ever see. Now imagine the night side, still asleep. Then the narration lands the coldest line I've ever read. Half the world dies in its sleep. They're the lucky ones. A warship coasts into the wreckage and puts the number on record. 5 billion people exterminated. And her reaction, floating in the supernova she made? The book says she's in ecstasy. Would you send anyone to fight that? An empire was about to answer that question. that same night.
An alien empress wakes to the report, recognizes the signature her people have feared for generations, and gives the order you'd expect. Deal with the threat, no matter the cost. But there's a complication. By the time the Empire arrives, the X-Men have their Jean back, lucid, grieving, herself. The Empire doesn't care. So the Professor invokes the one custom an Empress can't refuse, a duel of honor for Jean's life, which hands her friends one night and one question. Try it on yourself. The friend you love or 5 billion strangers? All 8 of them show up at dawn. Jean shows up in her old Marvel Girl costume, the one from the taxi and the chair. She tells Scott she started as Marvel Girl, and that's how she wants to finish. Hold that sentence. It's my favorite beat in the story. What did she know that nobody else did?
The duel goes exactly as badly as you think. When Scott gets cut down mid-fight, the grief snaps every restraint the Professor built into her mind, and a flare erupts off the moon, red across known space. The message every empire receives at once. Phoenix is reborn. But the reveal underneath is what wrecks me. She'd planned this from the moment they landed, and you can trace every step. She'd lifted the location of an ancient weapon from enemy mines. She'd used the duel to drain her own power to killable levels. Imagine planning your own death well enough to fool the telepaths beside you. And when her friends refused to finish it, she pinned Scott with a thought, told him she loved him, and fired the weapon into herself. The fire and life incarnate returned to the cosmos because the human holding it decided 5 billion was enough. Her professor's epitaph asks the only question left. She could have lived as a god, so why die? Because it mattered more to her that she die a human. Nothing topped that ending for decades, not until the series with her dead sister in it.
Because here's where Jean stands today. In the Solo series, she's headlining right now. And the first thing it tells you is a statement, not a question. She's reclaimed the power for her own, not host, not vessel. The narration goes further than any comic before it. Jean is and always has been the Phoenix. The showcases match it. She stabilizes a collapsing black hole by becoming it. But watch the call she makes when a dark god escapes mid-crisis. She lets him go because the catch would cost hundreds of lives. Would you have let him run? The book says she chose like a mortal instead of a god. The lesson of the moon? Kept. But the current arc detonates all of it. Jean starts dreaming about Sarah, the sister she buried years ago. Killed, Scott reminds her flatly, for standing up for mutants. The dreams feel like a call. So Jean does what you'd probably do with her power. She walks into the Phoenix's own afterlife to look. Something is in there, attacking it. And standing in the wreckage is a hooded woman with her sister's pulse and warmth, real to every test Jean can run. Sarah shows her a sanctuary city, says she's been searching for their family, then drops the admission that should freeze you. When she pulled Jean out, something went wrong. The issue ends on the sisters embracing in deep space, while a bloodied, armored hand reaches into the frame behind them. So ask the question Jean won't, the one every fan theory circles. Who attacks heaven at the exact moment a dead woman walks out of it?
Now put the movie next to that. Sadie Sink is Jean Grey in the new Spider-Man film, Brand New Day, playing in cinemas right now, off the biggest opening day any movie has posted. A reveal that only broke at the premiere 4 days ago, and her first ever appearance inside the MCU. And look at which Jean the MCU chose. On screen, she's a teenage telepath the movie treats as its villain because she's possessing people and aiming them at a government agency. The truth underneath? That agency took her sister Sarah, a telepath like her, experimented on her, and Jean arrived too late. The rampage was grief looking for a target. So the two Jeans just collided, and I promise you can't unsee it once it clicks. The movie built its Jean around losing a sister named Sarah. The comics this year handed their Jean that sister back, with a bloodied hand hanging over the reunion.
One buries her, one resurrects her. Neither one is safe. And which Jean is Marvel building the MCU's X-Men future around? No X-Men film has a date yet, but fans felt the ground shift. The seed just went in, planted in the year's biggest movie. 63 years ago, she was the girl who moved a chair, introduced by her looks, fifth on her own team. Today, she eats stars, and her comic hangs on that bloodied hand. But you can set your watch by what she does when the power asks her to be a god. The bay, the moon, the black hole. She answers like a human. That's the one thing the Phoenix never burned out of her. So don't ask how strong Jean Grey is. Ask what she's willing to lose to stay the girl underneath. That test is coming for the screen version too. Right now, the MCU's Jean is one film old, a teenager in a cinema near you, sister already gone, and her MCU story hasn't shown a spark of Phoenix yet. What do you think happens when it does?